All right, our next lesson, and thank you for meeting with us on YouTube, and please subscribe. It'll make getting to these videos easier. Chapter 15, Lesson 1. Hold on a second, Mr. B. How did we get to Chapter 15 all of a sudden? We skipped a bunch of stuff. It's not that it's good stuff, I like all the material, but when I designed all these lessons, this was more important for the EOC. Are we doing the EOC, Abby?
No.
No, it's canceled, but this is a good lesson. I had it pretty much put together, so this is what I prefer to teach. If we have more time, maybe we'll go back to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, but right now focus on lesson 15. Remember, I'm asking you to read all this material in your online book also. It's pretty easy. You go to ClassLink, you look for McGraw-Hill Connect Ed, hit that icon. You'll get a drop-down menu that asks you what chapter and what lesson, and guess what? That's the chapter and lesson. There's the pages if you have a physical book. The ClassLink book won't always have page numbers and everything, so you gotta look for the chapter and lesson. All right, today we're talking about sources and types of law. This is to give you even more background and even more understanding about how our judicial system works. All right, Abby, does it make sense that law should be fair, reasonable, understandable, and enforceable?
Yeah, makes sense.
Sure. What is a fair law?
Like everyone gets the same trial process, everyone gets the same opportunities of like
Everybody gets equal treatment and equal protection under the law. If somebody breaks the law, it doesn't matter whether they're a wealthy person or a homeless person. If it's fair, do they all get treated the same?
yes.
Can that be hard to do?
Yes.
It can be hard to do. But a law as written should be fair. It should be reasonable, which means, at least in this definition, what, Abby?
Punishment should be appropriate to the crime.
Right. If you shoplift, should your punishment be you get your hand cut off?
No.
That would be unreasonable of a law, and it would be against what? The Constitution too,
Yeah.
wouldn't it? Eighth Amendment says
Like protection.
no cruel and unusual
Yeah.
punishment. A law has to be understandable. This is a little bit challenging because we're not a bunch of lawyers and judges, so sometimes it can be hard to understand a law. But our legislative branch should work hard to make our laws understandable. Abby, if you don't know something is against the law, can you still be arrested for it?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. If you can't understand the law, but you break a law, can you still be arrested, found guilty?
Yeah.
Yes. So it's up to our legislature to make laws as understandable as possible.
There's like a whole like list of crazy laws. So like I'm just wondering, how do those come about? And like people are never gonna be arrested for doing some of those things. So why would they even be a law in the first place? Like putting an ice cream cone in your pocket or something. Like that's one of them.
Sure. Excellent question. There's even books out there, and there's a title that says something like, "You have broken 10 laws today," or "You break a law at least once a day." That is precisely because between your local governments, your state governments, and your federal governments, those legislatures aren't always disciplined, and they don't always follow this. So legislatures will create laws. Sometimes in like a state of Florida, you actually get to vote on these laws, and people vote for this stuff. And they may not be any of these four things or all of these four things.
Yeah.
It is one of the problems of our system today. And the only thing that's going to fix it is legislatures that work really hard to limit the number of laws to only things that are really important, and informed citizens. So when I vote in Florida and there's a law that comes up on the ballot, I'm informed and I vote against it. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yes. But it is difficult. Yes, in America today, you have woken up, I don't know when you're watching this, but it's almost noon my time as I film it. You may have already broken a law and you had no idea. Don't do it again. Laws are part of the social contract. Hopefully you remember good old Thomas Hobbes. The whole idea is about laws, again, is this idea of social government. I give up some of my rights. I give up the right to bash people on the head. I follow the law. And why do I give up these rights? Because I benefit from the law, and I benefit in that another citizen can't run up and bash me on the head. The government becomes the referee that enforces these laws, so I have given up some freedom. I can't bash people on the head. I can't drive 100 miles an hour, okay? But I gain benefits from the fact that nobody else can drive 100 miles an hour either. Nobody can bash anybody over the head, and if they do, what happens?
They go to jail.
The government intervenes with the police who enforce the laws, and then the justice system, which will find people guilty or innocent and punish them if they're guilty and let them regain their freedom if they're innocent.
What about laws that like don't give you any benefit for following them? Like for example, like weed. Like there's no like direct effect on your life if someone else is smoking weed. Like, you know what I mean? It's not going to negatively affect you. So why would it?
And you will find people that won't agree with you, Abby, and that's where it does become difficult. You as a citizen need to work with your legislative branch at the local, state, and federal level. And if you think marijuana should be legalized, what you do is you vote for politicians that agree with you. And even if they don't, you call them, you email them, you go meet them and say, hey, Governor DeSantis, marijuana's harmless. The economy can improve if we sell it. It has good medical benefits. Governor DeSantis, you should work with Florida's legislature and create laws here in Florida, like in California or Colorado, because I want to be able to go to a store, buy marijuana, and, enjoy it. It's just a plant. That's how that's supposed to work. And that's how that has worked in Colorado or California, the other states where marijuana is legal. So Abby, I lost track there why we weren't talking about that, but Abby is posing that not all laws may benefit you in this social contract. Absolutely. Everybody is not going to agree with these laws. You ever see anybody driving around like a crazy person, Abby?
Mm-hmm.
So they don't obey the laws?
Yeah.
Yeah. They have no seatbelt on? Sure. May they be drunk?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Do people rob banks?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. People beat other people up? Yes. Everybody is not following these social contract things. They're not following the law. And then it's the government's job to intervene, arrest, and punish. Do all these laws always benefit you? Well, of course not. May some of these laws, are you convinced they actually hurt you? Absolutely. Your job is, in the social contract, to work to change that government so you agree on the sides of the contract. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Of course, Locke, all about social contract too. Locke's improvement to the social contract, Abby, is, do you have any idea? Do you remember from your 7th grade civics? He says there's a social contract between government and the people.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think he says the people should do if the government isn't fulfilling its side of the contract?
Change it?
Change it! Rebel! That's exactly why Locke is huge with our founding fathers. Our founding fathers said, gee, we don't like the laws of Great Britain. What should we do? And they'd be like, well, excuse me, sir. I read this guy named John Locke, and he said you should rebel. And that's what we believed then, and we should still believe today. Do you necessarily need to rebel? No. But do you change your government?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And what's the appropriate way today to change your government?
Protest?
Protest or?
Petitions?
Or? How am I going to?
Voting.
Voting. Yes. You vote. Laws come from many places. What is the first written law that we can put our fingers on because somebody chipped this into stone and it still exists today? Abigail?
The Bible?
No, we'll get to that.
I guess that thing,
Code of Hammurabi. My 7th graders, hopefully you remember, you might have heard about the Babylonians and Hammurabi in 6th grade with Miss Wibbs. Long, long ago, almost 2000 BC, Hammurabi, who's basically the emperor of this place called Babylon, created the first code of laws that we know about. And the only reason why we know about it, it was chipped into stone in this type of language called, or correction, type of script or writing called cuneiform. So this is cuneiform, etched into this stone, and at the top we have Hammurabi basically passing this code of law down. So in Babylon, first code of law that we could prove existed, and it was pretty tough.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear about eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, usually that comes from the Bible and Israelite or Hebrew law, but those ideas come from Hammurabi's code of laws. If you poke somebody's eye out, the law would say, you get your eye poked out.
Mm-hmm.
And it basically worked like that. Now when you go into it, you're going to find there's different classes. So if a rich guy pokes another rich guy's eye out, it's an eye for an eye. But if a rich guy pokes a slave's eye out, you just got to pay the owner of the slave some money. So it wasn't exactly fair like we expect laws today, but they had a code of laws. Israelite law, Hebrew law, you probably know about this if you do from the Ten Commandments. Israel is a small country in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Middle East area. You see those on the map. Hopefully you can pick that out. Not long after Hammurabi in Babylon, the Israeli people start creating a code of law. It's passed down through us through the Old Testament of the Bible, the Ten Commandments, and it has stuff like what in the Ten Commandments?
Like, don't kill people.
Don't kill people. Written down code of law. Newer than Hammurabi, but it's another place when we start saying, hey, there should be these things called laws. There's stuff people should do, people shouldn't do, and who's the referee in the middle?
God?
Well, practically
The government.
a government, yes. Then we're going to fast forward to the Roman Empire. Again, you've learned about this in 6th grade. Roman Empire basically covers the known world at the time, from England in the northwest to places like Israel there in the east and all the way south to northern Africa. In time, Rome splits in half to an eastern empire called the Byzantine Empire and the Western Empire. This guy named Justinian, Eastern Emperor, he creates a code of laws. This code of laws is important because this code of laws is written down, and it basically becomes the place where the church, the Catholic Church, starts creating codes of laws. And when Rome dissolves, the biggest government and most important government system in Europe back then is going to wind up being the Catholic Church, which is going to create its own code of laws too, which greatly influence modern laws today. Any questions on that? The Napoleonic Code, named after who?
Napoleon.
Napoleonic Code comes from France. It's really something that affects laws in countries that have a French history, like Eastern Canada, other places in Latin America and Africa. Not too much in the United States, with the exception of one state. Louisiana has a tremendous French influence. Why? A lot of French people settled there. They turn into the who, what we call the French background people still living in Louisiana today. They like spicy food and shooting alligators.
Hillbillies?
Cajuns.
What?
So the Code of Napoleon from Napoleon Bonaparte affects a lot of places in the world that had a lot of French influence, and at least in the United States, here in the southeastern United States, particularly in Louisiana, affected by the Napoleonic Code. But the most important source of law for the United States is from England and English common law. Why?
So that's where we are.
That's where we come from. Our founding fathers, Jefferson, Washington, Hamilton, were generally all Englishmen until the Revolution, when they finally say, hey, we're these things called Americans now. Their background was English. They knew English law. They had admired big chunks of English law. Okay? So when we create our own judiciaries and our own legal system, it's heavily dependent on English law, particularly this one thing called common law. Common law is basically law that is created in the court system by following precedents, a term we've talked about a lot. So courts make decisions in cases, and that creates a set of law called common law. If I'm a judge, I don't have to recreate the wheel every trial. I look at what's in front of me and I say, gee, this is how we usually handle this case, so that's how I'm going to handle it again. And that's important because people and systems need consistency. You don't want to make a different decision every day on the same stuff. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Great. Learn more by reading the chapter and looking at these slides. Types of law. We've talked about at least two of these before. We have criminal law, civil law, military law, which is its own thing, and constitutional law. Criminal law, Abby, what is criminal law?
Like what we would usually think of when we think of law, like robbing a bank or killing someone?
Yes. Criminal law is the set of laws that are enforcing this social contract to keep people safe and protect their property. Criminal law keeps me safe. You can't come up and run over and bash me on the head. You can't go in my house and steal my stuff. Criminal law protects my physical safety and protects my property. And if somebody breaks the social contract and breaks those laws, government intervenes, arrests, and punishes.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between a felony and a misdemeanor?
Felony is like a lot more serious and bad. And a felony would be like killing someone.
Absolutely.
A misdemeanor would be like shoplifting.
Absolutely perfect. You want to know more? Click the link. Good explanation of the difference between felonies and misdemeanors, but Abby hit it right on the nose. Felonies, serious crimes. Misdemeanors, minor crimes. Felonies, how are they typically punished, Abby? If you commit a felony,
Life in jail?
you go to jail.
Or-
Could be for a long time.
Yeah.
Sure. Or,
Lethal punishment. Like,
yes, in about half the United States, there is something called capital punishment or the death penalty.
Mm-hmm.
Misdemeanors, how you typically punished in a misdemeanor?
Probation or like public service or like a small short time in jail.
Probation, public service, a small time or usually a very, very short time in jail.
Or just like a mark on your record or something.
Yeah, typically less than a year. You're not going to jail because that would not be reasonable to go to jail for a misdemeanor. It's probably not reasonable for you to get a $50 fine and community service if you murder a busload of children. Neither of those would be reasonable.
Yeah.
So since our laws are meant to be reasonable, felonies are more heavily punished than misdemeanors, to include capital punishment. That is when the state, the government, whether it's a state government or the federal government, not only takes away all your liberties, it takes away your life. You go to jail, you lose most of your rights and freedoms and your liberties. Not all, but you're losing a lot of rights and freedoms and liberties because I can't go where I want and do what I want. I'm sitting in a jail cell, showering with 80 people who don't like me every day, eating bologna sandwiches and sharpening my toothbrush because I know the Bloods are going to try to kill me and I'm going to have to stab somebody, all right? Felonies go to prison. Worst punishment, or the ultimate punishment, is capital punishment. Not all states have capital punishment. Please learn more here. Typical capital punishment used in the United States today is what, Abigail?
The lethal injection?
Lethal injection, and they typically hit you with a series of 3 different drugs. One drug basically puts you to sleep like an anesthetic. Another drug typically stops your breathing, and that third drug is designed to stop your heart. So after that cocktail of those 3 different injections, usually you're dead. But guess what, Abby? You think it works all the time? No. Unfortunately, it does not. So, Abby, some people who are opposed to capital punishment, why do you think they're opposed to capital punishment?
Either they think it's like the eye for an eye thing, like they killed someone so they get killed, and so therefore these people are murdering people.
Right.
Or like they're actually giving them like a way out of, paying their dues, I guess, for their crime. Like instead of spending the rest of their life rotting in jail, they just get to die and then it's over. Or like some people, it's like a money thing.
Yep. The people who are against the death penalty are against it for a variety of reasons. A lot of things you talked about, Abigail. But from like Bill of Rights things, what would be the arguments against the death penalty, Bill of Rights wise?
Like you're not supposed to kill people?
The 8th Amendment says
Cruel and
no cruel and unusual punishment. So some people argue against the death penalty, saying it violates the 8th Amendment. It can be cruel and unusual to kill human beings, whether it's with drugs or electricity or firing squad or whatever. What if it doesn't work right? Which sometimes happens with these methods. It causes people pain and anguish,
Seizures.
and people will say that's cruel and unusual to do that. Other people are against the death penalty on 14th Amendment grounds. 14th Amendment is equal protection under the law. So the argument would go something like this. Abigail, if you are rich and you murder somebody, do you think you're going to get the death penalty?
Absolutely not.
If you are dirt poor, you're a homeless person, you murder somebody, do you think you're more likely to get the death penalty as
Yeah.
opposed to that rich person?
Yes.
Do you think that's equal protection under the law?
No.
Right. And this will be the argument some lawyers use in arguing against the death penalty.
And also, it's not like foolproof. Like people have been killed by like the death penalty that have been like discovered that they were innocent and that they didn't do it. Because
That's
once you're dead, you can't take it back.
That's a violation of your 5th and 14th Amendment rights too. You could be given every protection under the system, but can you still convict someone and execute somebody that's perfectly innocent?
Yeah.
Sure. Not just innocent in a trial sense, but innocent in the sense we usually mean, which means they just didn't do it?
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Also interesting to note, take a look at this. You'll see it better on your slideshow. It's a graph showing which countries have the death penalty. The countries that use the death penalty today, the only real first world Western oriented democracies that use the death penalty are us and Japan. The only other countries that usually use the death penalty these days are countries like North Korea, China, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, etc. Countries that aren't democracies, or if they are, they're poorly functioning democracies. So some people will use that in their arguments about the death penalty, like, gee, does Canada have the death penalty? No. Does Australia? No. Does England? No. France? No. Italy? No. Spain? No. These are the countries, if you think what our friends are, who we're equal to, none of these other countries have the death penalty anymore. Who has the death penalty? China, North Korea, Afghanistan, Iraq, Iran. I said Afghanistan, but yeah. So think about that too. Civil law. What's civil law, Abs?
Like neighborly disputes, like someone's fence is on someone else's property or something?
Absolutely. All that stuff you covered under Judge Judy. When a citizen has a issue or dispute with another citizen, the way they figure it out and settle it is by using civil law. So this is called a lawsuit.
Mhm.
And if you win, what do you usually get in a civil lawsuit?
Money?
Money. You get the problem fixed, and a lot of time that's fixed by one side gives the other money.
So divorce would fall under civil law.
There's a lot of other stuff in civil law. Mostly we think about tort law. Tort law is you hurt me somehow, we're fixing this. But there's also contract law. If we make an agreement, you break it, that's civil law. Property, if you mess up my property somehow, civil law. And all this complex stuff on families, divorces, custody, they're all types of civil law
Yeah.
too. What do you think military law applies to?
People that are in the military.
Why do you think the military has its own special system of law?
Because it's so different from like public life. Like there's a whole different set of responsibilities on you and a whole different set of like, I guess ideals you have to follow. And
Yes.
so if you break one of those key things, you're putting other people in danger. So
Yes.
it's more serious.
Yes. And it gets really simple. For example, you have a job, Abby.
Mm-hmm.
You don't show up, what happens?
Maybe fired.
You get fired. You may get a warning first, etc., but you probably get fired. If you're in the military and you decide not to show up, what happens then?
They declare you like AWOL. And
Yeah,
then,
you're
like,
now a
yeah.
deserter. They track you down. You get a trial. You could go in jail. Why is it different between the two?
Because your job is so essential when you're in the military, and like someone not showing up can mean like a whole plan can be like ruined and people's lives can
Sure.
be in
If
danger.
I'm in the military, I can't just wake up and say, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm gone.
Yeah.
This is one of the basic reasons and one of the things I want you to think about why the military has its own system of law. Plus, this military does odd things too. We go all over the world, and what do?
Fight.
Fight, blow stuff up. Do we kill other human beings?
Yeah.
So there needs to be an own set of law to control that, okay? So that's military law, covered under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. That's the military set of law. And instead of a trial under military law, you have a what?
I can't read that.
Court-martial. Abby didn't bring her glasses. Instead of a trial, the military has their version of a trial, which is called a court-martial. You get basically all your civil rights and Bill of Rights protections, but military law is different to include how some of the trials go, but we won't get into that. If you really want to know about military law, we have the great thing called the Google, or you can come and ask me questions or discuss it more. Any idea who that picture is, that dude in the middle?
I don't know.
It's a guy named Bales. In Afghanistan one night, he put on his armor, got his weapons loaded up with ammo, walks off his base by himself into an Afghan village, murders 16 people. Click the links to find out more. I bring him up because even though it's the military's job to fight and kill and destroy, there's still limits and laws to that. You can't walk into a village and shoot 16 women and children. That is against military law. That would be something that's called a war crime.
Well, why did he do it then?
Good questions. Click the links to find more. Basically, his defense was he had PTSD and was drinking and abusing drugs.
In the military?
Yes.
When did he get access to those things?
So in Afghanistan and in the military, there's this thing called General Order 1. You're not allowed to drink, and of course you're not allowed to use drugs. Are humans humans?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think some find a way to violate this law?
For sure.
Yeah, and he definitely did. So his defense was he was temporarily insane. He admits to going in this village and killing 16 people. And when I talk about killing 16 people, I'm not saying killing 16 soldiers who had weapons. He killed 16 civilians, many of which were lying in bed because it's in the middle of the night, and they're civilians. And we're talking about infants and old people. Not military-age males with weapons defending themselves. 16 straight up, no kidding, civilians. So of course that's a war crime, that's against the law. His defense was, and again, please read more, it's an interesting case. He had PTSD from other deployments. He may have had traumatic brain injury from wounds and fighting, and he was under the influence of maybe drugs and or alcohol. He was basically temporarily insane at the time, so he really wasn't responsible for those murders.
Well, did he end up going to jail for life?
Yeah. He went to jail. He's in jail for life. He's got an appeal, though, too.
No death penalty? They didn't even talk about it?
The federal government does have the death penalty, and the way I understood it was he said, hey, I'll agree to plead guilty to this stuff if you take the death penalty off the table. It's called a plea bargain, which we may talk about later. But click the links, learn, it's interesting, and it tells you a lot about military law quickly. Constitution covers constitutional law. That's the 7,500 words, 4 pages of our Constitution. All the amendments, Bill of Rights things, and all the court and Supreme Court decisions that go into explaining what the Constitution says and means. That's constitutional law. And we see artist depiction of a lawyer giving a oral argument in front of the Supreme Court. And as soon as he or she gets up there and starts talking, what do the 9 Supreme Court justices start doing?
Start tracking the time.
Yeah. Set the 30-minute timer and
ask questions.
Ask lots of questions.
So like,
crash course. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Abby.
Oh, I was just gonna ask, like, so would constitutional law, like someone like keeping you from voting, like holding you back from voting, would that be under constitutional law?
Yes, typically.
Okay.
Depends on details because most voting is done by states. But the Supreme Court just ruled on a voting case like 2-3 days ago. So they do voting because those are basic rights and constitutional issues. They typically come up from the states though. I think this was a Wisconsin case. Crash course, I like it. It's a good review of judicial branch and all this sources and types of laws. We also have administrative law. That comes from government agencies. If you want to know about pollution, that's covered by administrative law. You want to know what you can or can't do in a national park? Administrative law. You want to know what the safety regulations are for driving a school bus? Administrative law. Makes sense.
So people that like work in the CSI and like FBI, would that fall under military law or administrative law?
That is typically criminal law.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's typically in pursuit of investigating crimes. Could you potentially have a civil case that needs that technology to prove who's right or wrong, one side or the other in a lawsuit?
I mean, like the people
Sure.
that work in those branches. So like if someone in the FBI did something wrong with like the technology they have or something.
Depends. If they have committed a crime, that's criminal law. If somebody wants to sue that FBI agent, that would probably be civil law.
So they don't have their own set of laws for working
No.
in those?
They do not.
Okay.
So, Abby, you're an FBI agent. You make up evidence and you arrest me. I would sue you in civil court because that would be started as civil law. Now, if I'm suing you on a constitutional issue, you broke the Fourth Amendment, unreasonable search and seizure, then that transitions more to constitutional law.
Okay.
If I run a business, I'm really keyed into this administrative law. I got to know all the regulations in my industry. I run an airline. There's a lot of safety, pollution, customer safety, administrative law. I got to follow those things. Learn more. Click this link. Oh yeah, nasty, brutish, and short. It's a Hobbes quote. I like it. Love Hobbes. Lesson review questions. If you have the book and the slides, you should be able to answer these easy. You're struggling with that, use the Googles. You're really struggling, ask me. Any questions, Abby?
No, sir.
Be safe, wash your hands, social distance, be healthy, and hopefully I'll see you soon.